Hi everyone, I'm Georges Saint-Pierre with Eric Owings, and we are here today to explain to you the Rush Fit foundation movements.
The foundation movements are, well, they're our foundation. So we don't want to just rush through this segment and think that these movements aren't necessary and you just want to hop into the workouts. It's actually very important that you spend time focusing on these basic foundation movements and then go into the workouts. If you've mastered the movements in this segment, you're going to find that you're going to be able to perform everything with ease. Well, not with ease, but with competency. And by doing that, you're going to be able to progress and reach your fitness goals, whatever they may be. So it's very important you take time, you watch, you learn, and then you spend time mastering them. You don't need to use a lot of weight. Some of the movements are just body weight. Some require dumbbells. But it's going to be very important that you take your time and that you make sure that your body's in proper alignment. Pay attention throughout the concept of core activation, the concept of good posture, of doing everything with correct form, minimal amount of weight, and then add weight as you feel necessary. If you do these movements correctly, you're going to find understanding the future DVDs are going to be a piece of cake.
We all train for different purposes, but make sure we get those movements right.
Okay, everybody, let's talk a little bit about the squat. The squat's one of the most fundamental motions that you're ever going to do in exercise and fighting and anything. I think almost everything that you do almost always has a component of changing your level up and down. So whether the person says level change, whether they say shoot, sprawl, whatever it is you're doing, almost always there's a little bit of a bend here. So we want to develop this to the fullest capability. That's why we include squatting. You see a lot of squatting in this program. And in the beginning, you might notice that your range of motion is not so good, but eventually it will increase as long as you take your time and kind of work within your own limits. And eventually you want to get to what is considered full range of motion, which is a parallel thigh to the ground and an upright posture. So if you notice when George comes down, George, if you can, squat down and hold the squat here. If you notice, George is pretty much settling into his heels. His knees aren't far past his toes, and he's sitting back like he's sitting down into a chair. Then he comes back up in the standing. Yes, I'm going to do a few reps, George. Let everybody see you doing the reps. And hold again at the bottom, George, if you can. Come back down. Good. Yeah, right there. And like I said, if you notice parallel thigh, and then he starts to come up. Now, if necessary, the modification, if you're having a tough time, or you can stop, George, is going to be just to go a little bit more shallow. But what we don't want to see is we don't want to see the knees buckling in. This is a definite no-no. We want the knees coming out, okay? If necessary, you can widen your stance a little bit. So you don't want a narrow stance. Remember, shoulder width, toes are slightly to the outside, just a little bit, okay? We're not going really wide, just a little bit to the outside. And what you want to do is your arms come up as you sit back. So you have to kind of sit back. Imagine you're sitting into a chair. And if you're having a tough time, you can always put a chair behind you. But if you find that even you lose control, like you get here and you almost fall over, you fall back, that's totally okay. What you want to do there is you want to go a little bit more shallow, then stand. And eventually work your depth down till you get the parallel. So we're going to do a couple more, George. Let everybody see the full range of motion. Yep, then up, one more. And this is a motion that, okay, George, you can relax. For George, this is extremely important for any fighter, for any athlete, for anybody almost, is the ability to go up and down with control of the core, with complete stabilization here in the body, being able to maintain this here all the way down to there. This is an essential motion for life, no matter whether you're fighting or just going about your daily routine.
Absolutely, it's a movement pattern that happens every minute of every fight.
And that's the squat. The lunge is one of the most essential motions, probably next to the squat. It's a little bit more complex, so there's a few more things we have to pay attention to. The squat, for most people, is a basic movement, whereas lunging, we're actually going forward, to the side, backwards, or crossing behind. There's basically 4 ways that we're going to do this. So George, if you can go in all 4 directions, let's go 2 to the front, then 2 side to side.
The knee doesn't touch the ground when you go in the front.
And backwards.
You see, my knee doesn't touch the ground.
And the cross back variation, where we go side to side. So we try 4 different variations, even though George has a good range of motion here. He's he's doing everything the proper way. And George, if I can just have you stop for a second and go out there into the lunge and lower down. And you can lower down. George is going to let his knee touch here just to relax his leg muscles, but normally he's not going to let his leg touch. If anything, he's just going to kiss the ground. It's just going to touch and come back up. Now, if you notice here, George, although he comes out, he comes forward, he's not driving his knee forward. He actually steps, he takes a natural step forward, and then he just sinks his weight down into his heel. That's very important. What we don't want happening is this, and then I keep going forward, and I feel a stretch here, like this is like a tearing sensation. Also, this puts a lot of stress on the knee. So I want to keep my foot on the ground, and then as I take this natural step forward, I go here, then I just lower down, okay? We want to maintain good posture. Sometimes we include a touchdown. That's totally acceptable. And the same thing, now if we come up, George, if we go to the side, notice how the knee doesn't go forward, you actually sit back. You sit back under your heels, and the arms act as a counterbalance here. Or you can touch down. If we move backwards, that's good. And if we go backwards here, same thing. We go back, and then I sink down into the heel of the front leg. And if I go to the transverse of the cross back lunge, I come here. My front leg, I sink down into the heel and up. Now, each one of these lunges, we go in different directions because, well, our body can move in different directions. We don't develop strength in just one range of motion. We want a variety of movement patterns that give us more balance throughout our body. And would you say this is pretty similar to what you do when you take someone down, when you shoot him for a takedown?
Absolutely. Not only, I would say, the takedown, the changing level, the footwork, even the most basic stuff that we do in mixed martial art, we use lunges in a certain way.
And you'll find at home, say if you have a hard time going all the way out into this position, you feel that you lose your balance and you're having a tough time, the best thing to do here is go a little bit wider with your stance, take a natural step forward, and then you're just going to do what we call a split squat. So it's a variation. We're not lunging, we actually stay in stance. So you can stay in stance and just touch down, or just stay up here and you come up. And if you find you have to restrict your range of motion a bit, that's totally acceptable. But what you don't want to do is come out here where you feel like you're falling and your knees are shaking and you're losing balance. So same thing with a lateral lunge. If I had to just stay here, I can do a stationary movement and restrict the range of motion a bit. But you want to try to get to where you do the full range of motion and include the movement patterns. But if you have to, you can stay stationary, do say 5 reps, 10 reps, how many ever is necessary from a stationary position. Then you switch, come into a stationary position, and it'll look just like this. That's the modification if you're having a tough time, and that's the lunge. The push-up is one of the most basic upper body exercises we can do. It requires no equipment, and you can almost do it in any space. If you just have a tiny little space in your living room, your bedroom, wherever, you can always do some push-ups. Now, the key to a push-up is maintaining good alignment of the body. So I should almost be able to transfer the same exact stance that you see here standing right to the ground. We don't want to be caved in here but too high. We want to think about almost a line that forms, if you drew it straight through the body, your ear, shoulder, hip, knee, ankle, going straight through. Once the deviations start to occur, that shows that your core stability is now, it's malfunctioning, and you're going to have to make a modification. We'll show some modifications, but let's first take a look at how it's performed correctly. George, let's go ahead and do a couple push-ups here, okay? Just a normal standard push-up. Notice how George has a great alignment here with his body. It's straight through, and that's because George has a strong core. By having a strong core, he's able to maintain that position. Now, George can do a variety of push-ups here. Let's do some knuckle push-ups, George. So by changing his grip, he changes the angle, and the angle changes which muscles are working, and he can work different parts of his body just by changing the way that his hands are placed. He can go narrow or wide with his grips. He can go up on his knuckles. That requires more wrist stability. Push-ups have a lot of variations. They have a lot of stuff you can do. Let's show a plyo push-up here. Just show, this is an explosive push-up. So it's the same movement, but just performed differently. Okay, great. And go ahead and relax. So that's basically a perfect push-up. Now, if you're having a tough time and you find, like I said, is I come into this position and I get up here and I start doing this, or my head starts coming down, I start breaking my form. The best modification you can make when that starts happening, so maybe, let's say I start off strong. I do 5 push-ups, but then my range of motion starts to get shorter, my neck starts to lead down, my hips start to sag. I want to try to maintain this alignment, and then it's lower